Friends find abandoned boat in the woods and actually flip it over. When you hear the words bachelor party, you probably think about a group of guys drinking, relaxing, talking, bonding, and generally having a good time. However, when one group of friends went to an isolated cabin retreat in the woods and decided to take a dog along, things quickly took a very unexpected turn. When they arrived at the cabin, they had barely had time to unpack and get settled in before the dog started to sniff around. Suddenly, picking up a scent, she charged off into the distance. Naturally, they ran after her to see where she was going. What they found, however, would change their weekend plans entirely. Any dog owner knows how acute a dog's sense of smell is. Dog owners also know this all too familiar and worrying scenario. Once a dog picks up a scent, it will rush off to follow it. And the best we can do is try to keep up and hope they don't get into trouble before we reach them. No one thought anything would happen if they brought a dog along to the cabin in the woods. The men never imagined that one simple act would not only change their plans, but their entire weekend. While they might never have planned this, in the end, none of them would change a thing. So what exactly happened? When one of the friends mentioned that they were bringing their dog along for the trip, not one of the guys had an issue with the man's best friend joining them. As soon as they arrived, however, she surprised them all by rushing off without warning. Her owner was perplexed. She had never behaved like this before. The men ran after her, but she'd already disappeared. After searching and calling, they finally found her, though she was behaving extremely odd. The dog seemed to be fixated on a specific metal boat that had been stowed on land. It was upturned, so she seemed to want to see what was under it. She wouldn't leave it alone. After the men took a few minutes to catch their breath, they tried to pull her away from the boat she was so transfixed by, hoping to return to the cabin and continue with their bachelor party. However, no matter how much they tried to coax her away, the dog refused to move away from the upturned vessel. The dog was 100% focused on the boat and completely ignored the group of friends. She just kept whining and circling the boat, pawing it and trying to lift it with her snout, sniffing underneath it intently. It was clear that there was something under the boat that had her attention, but what could it be? There was no way that the friends were going to abandon the dog, and her strange behavior was now starting to make them curious as well. So one of the men, who was also the dog's owner, slowly approached the boat and slowly flipped it over. Soon they came face to face with an unexpected sight that made them jump. Under the boat lay a few kittens. That is why the dog had acted so strangely. She had picked up the scent of the abandoned kittens. The men couldn't believe she had sensed that they were there and had led them straight to the helpless animals. They had called her, but she refused to leave until they found them. But what had happened? How long the poor kittens had been stuck under the boat for remained a mystery. And whether the tiny kittens had been abandoned by their mother, or if their mother had passed away, it was impossible to tell. But the group of men knew that they had to do something. The men dropped to their knees and inspected the kittens. No matter what the answers to the mystery were, the good news was that the kittens were not only in good health, but thankfully they seemed to be in good shape too. In fact, the little balls of fluff seemed to be as healthy as kittens who lived in loving homes. Normally, when you think of cats and dogs together, you picture fights, chases, and general chaos. And even more surprisingly, this particular dog had never met a cat before. So the men were amazed to see that, instead of chasing them, the dog seemed to be absolutely crazy about their adorable and furry little rescues. The dog instantly began to fuss over the kittens. It was clear that her maternal instincts had kicked in and she was focused on caring for the kittens as if they had been her own pups. On top of that, the kittens didn't hesitate to walk up to the dog as if they were old friends. Then the dog started to lick and bathe the kittens, cleaning the dirt from their fur. When the men lifted up the boat, the kittens' eyes widened in amazement as they saw the big forest around them. The men knew that the dog that they had brought along for their trip had certainly saved them from a more unpleasant fate. Now the only question was what to do with the kittens. The men decided that since they had enough provisions, they would take them back to the cabin and give them a proper meal. The dog walked proudly beside the men as if she knew the enormity of what she had done for the helpless kittens. The group of friends had intended to make burgers and hot dogs for dinner, but they quickly realized that was exactly what the kittens needed: meat. They prepared a huge bowl of hamburger meat for their little rescues and watched them happily tuck in. The dog who had found them also received some meat scraps as a reward. After all, she had earned it. After waiting around the spot where the kittens were found, the men quickly realized that the mother wasn't coming back for her kittens. They had no choice but to take matters into their own hands. It was decided that the first thing the men needed to do was to take the kittens to a vet, to make sure that there were no health issues. The vet checked the kittens over and was astounded. He gave them a clean bill of health after numerous tests, just to be sure. The vet and the men were amazed that the kittens were in such good condition, especially given the circumstances and where they were found. But there was more good news for these two lucky kittens. Shortly after the trip to the vet, both kittens were adopted by two of the group. It was the perfect ending to an eventful weekend. Although the men had to change their plans, they were grateful that they were able to save two lives that day. The men enjoyed each other's company, celebrated a bachelor party, and went home with two brand new family members.